What's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be a slightly earlier video for the round of 16. I think, pretty much today's been day 2 of match day 3. So we've found out who's finished first in Group B, C and A so far. So we're just basically waiting to find out who's going to finish first and the rest of the positions for Group D, E and F. But I thought I'd do a video because we could more or less have a rough guess of who's going to play against who, and also we've got some fixtures already, so I think it's probably worth putting some hints and tips out there for players whilst we've got time to play around with our teams. So let's get stuck into it. So just quickly, I've gone on the Telegraph predictor because I think this is a pretty good way of predicting probably who's going to play who. It is just simply based on odds and who's most likely to win or finish top in their group and places. So it may not be accurate, but it's at least a good, reasonably good estimate. So let's just have a quick look at this. So we've already got Group A, B, and C absolutely concrete. They're the places finished. And Group D, I think the odds are very in favour for England to beat Czech Republic, even though Czech Republic have done quite well, and for Croatia to beat Scotland. Now, goal difference wise, unless the goal difference is absolutely crazy, Croatia are not going to beat Czech Republic to second, so it's most likely that it's going to be this order: England first, Czech Republic second, Croatia third, Scotland out. That's probably going to be the order, but that's not guaranteed, obviously. So, but we'll come back to that because the order may not matter for this group too much anyway. So Group E, it's also most likely that Sweden will finish first. They're pretty much favourites to beat Poland, and also Spain are favourites to beat Slovakia. Now, if that's the case, if we just have a quick look at the table, here we go. So if Spain beat Slovakia, they'll finish on 5 points, and if Sweden beat Poland, they'll finish on 7 points. So that makes sense. And then obviously Slovakia will finish on 3 points. The goal difference is where it gets tricky, because if they finish with a really low goal difference and Spain win by quite a lot, I don't think that's going to be the case. But if they do, then that probably means that they won't make it through to the round of 16, because Ukraine, they'll be competing with Ukraine and Finland, who have got a goal difference of -1 and -2. So if Slovakia lose by 3 goals, or even 2 goals, I'd say, because they've not scored that many goals, even if they just lose by 2 goals and they end up on, or lose by 1 goal and they end up on a goal difference of -1, they'll be beaten by Ukraine, even though they're both on -1. Ukraine have scored 4 goals, and unless Slovakia lose but also score loads of goals, which is very unlikely, they're not going to beat Ukraine to that round of 16 spot. So I fancy Spain to beat Slovakia, and that probably means that Slovakia are probably not going to make it to round of 16. But you never know, they've surprised people this tournament, so you never know what could happen. But let's just move back to the predictor. That's what I've got here. That's, for me, the most likely outcome in terms of odds. Group F is really difficult to predict again, but this is again just on odds. Like Germany are very much favourites to beat Hungary. If we just have a look at the table, and France are also favourites to beat Portugal. That game is still up in the air a little bit. But if we just have to look at the table, if Germany beat Hungary, that's going to put them on 6 points, which means they're either going to finish top or second. Now, if France beat Portugal, they'll finish top. But if they draw, this is where it gets interesting, because Germany are most likely to beat Hungary, which means that Germany, if they win and France draw, then Germany will finish top of the group. But it may not matter so much, as we'll see in a second, because of the players and the tough fixtures coming up. So let's just go back to this for a second and go back to the predictor. Let's just say, even for example, we've got France first, Germany second, Portugal third. And then if we look at the third place rating, Switzerland are very likely to make the round of 16, because if we look at the table, they have finished on 4 points. Now, 4 points is very much likely enough to get them through to round of 16. The odds against them not making it are very, very slim. So Switzerland are pretty guaranteed. I would also imagine Portugal would as well, because their goal difference is on 0 and they're not likely to lose by a massive amount to France. So I would also predict that Portugal are likely as well. But I've actually put Croatia as more likely, because if we look at the table again, they're very likely to beat Scotland, and if they do that, they'll finish on 4 points again, and their goal difference will probably go up. So 4 points is definitely going to be enough. So Croatia probably second most likely. And then we've got Portugal to finish third. And I was just trying to decide between Slovakia and Ukraine, but I think that, this is again getting, the odds of this happening is actually quite slim, because getting all these predictions right is quite slim, but it may not matter too much, because we're going to be backing teams with the easiest fixtures anyway, and some teams can be grouped into an easy fixture. So essentially that's the predictions we've got. So if you just have a look at the guaranteed fixtures, we've got Italy versus Austria, Wales versus Denmark, Belgium versus Slovakia, Holland versus Portugal, Czech versus Spain, France versus Switzerland, Sweden versus Croatia, and England versus Germany. Now, I have to remember that England are going to face someone from Group F if they finish first. If they finish second, I think they're also going to face someone from Group F. So either way, England are going to have a tough fixture, and whoever's from Group F who's finishing first or second is going to have a tough fixture, most likely. I mean, this is one that's up in the air. I would actually kind of avoid Group F, but let's just focus on the fixtures which will make a difference. So if you look at Italy versus Austria, it's very easy going to be we're going to target Italy players because they're the favourites to beat Austria. Wales versus Denmark, this is kind of up in the air because they're both very, very defensive teams. Like, they don't really score that many goals. So personally, I would only be going for budget options, and I wouldn't really target any premiums. Maybe like Melee from Denmark and maybe like some defender from Wales. I mean, it's not really going to make too much of a difference this fixture, I don't think. Belgium versus Slovakia. Now, Belgium are definitely gone through, but if we just look from the predictor, they're in Group B. So first in Group B is Belgium, and they're going to play thirds from A, D, E, or F. So let's just have a quick think about who that could be. So thirds from A, that's going to be Switzerland because they finished third. So it's either going to be Belgium versus Switzerland. Let's just have another look. So D, E, or F. Who's most likely to finish third in D? Probably Croatia. So it's going to be Belgium versus Croatia. If it's not Belgium versus Croatia, it'll be Belgium versus Scotland. They're both good fixtures. Pretty much all of these are good fixtures. Belgium versus Switzerland, Croatia, or Scotland, they're all pretty good fixtures. So let's have another look. Group E. It's either going to be Slovakia. It's probably going to be Slovakia. If Spain don't beat Slovakia, they're probably not going to qualify. So yeah, so it's either going to be Slovakia or Spain, but I would still fancy Belgium to beat both of those teams. More likely Slovakia, of course, but either way, it's likely going to be one of those. So again, it's still a pretty decent fixture. The only one that gets difficult is if they face someone from Group F. So if someone finishes third in Group F, France are very unlikely to finish third in Group F, because that would require Portugal to beat them and for Germany to beat Hungary. Germany to beat Hungary is pretty likely, but Portugal to beat France is pretty unlikely. So I wouldn't fancy them to be facing France. It's either going to be, in fact, it's most likely going to be Portugal. So this is the only tough fixture I can foresee, is Belgium versus Portugal for Belgium. The rest of them are pretty simple. So again, we're probably going to be targeting Belgian players, but this is where it gets tricky, because no matter who Belgium play, if Belgium win that game and Italy win their game, which is both pretty likely, let's just do that quickly, they're going to end up facing each other. So this is where the tricky bit gets in, because most people are going to have Belgian players and most people are going to have Italy players. This fixture is very likely to happen. It's just a case of who's going to win, because that's going to make a big difference in terms of how many transfers you're going to have to make. So that's quite complicated, I know, but let's just stick with me for a second. So let's have a look at Group F now. So we're targeting this fixture, so first in Group F, but also want to have a look at second in Group F as well, because those are pretty predictable in my opinion. So let's just have a look at first in Group F. So this is either going to be, probably going to be France or Germany. It's unlikely to be Portugal. Let's just quickly have a look at that. So it's either going to be France or Germany. Germany most likely, because they're very likely to beat Hungary. France could always draw to Portugal. You never know. So I would actually favour Germany over France in this one. So let's have a look at that. First in Group F versus third in Group A, B, or C. Well, that's a good thing that we've got pretty much all those results. That's an easier one to predict. So there's either going to be Switzerland, Finland, or Ukraine. Now they're all pretty good fixtures. They're all going to leak goals. The only hardest fixture I'd say out of those three is probably Switzerland. But again, they're all pretty good fixtures. So if it's Portugal, France, or Germany, or let's just forget about Portugal for now, but if it's France or Germany, that's a good fixture to target. So it's either going to be France or Germany versus Switzerland, Finland, or Ukraine. So you're going to want to target German players and also French players. But let's just consider something else as well, which is that second in Group F faces first in Group D. Let's have a look at Group D. So first in Group D is either going to be England or Czech Republic. That's the most likely one. Now, they're both pretty tough fixtures, but having said that, it's still fairly predictable because England don't score many goals, Czech don't score many goals, and look at this. Second in Group F, that's either going to be Germany or France most likely. So again, you're probably still going to target French players and German players. So again, it's not going to change the fact that you're going to target those players if we just have a look again. So let's just consider that for a second. No matter who France are playing here, they're probably going to win. And no matter this is where it gets tricky actually, is that Germany versus England is again a tough fixture, so that's a little bit harder to predict. But essentially, whoever it is that goes through, in fact, let's just quickly try that out. Whoever wins out of that fixture doesn't really matter because they're not going to be facing France. So it's not really a fixture we need to focus on just yet. But we want to know who's going to be facing France because they're the favourites to beat to win their group and also to finish. And also to beat whoever they're facing in the round of 16. So let's just have a look at who they're likely to face. It's either going to be Czech Republic or Spain. And again, I fancy them to beat either one of those teams. So I know this is a lot of guesswork, but what I'm trying to get at is that you really just want to be targeting the favourite teams for the round of 16 because you don't want to be making transfers and taking hits during the quarterfinals and the semi-finals when things go wrong, and you know that's where you really want to be sticking to the bread and butter players. So let's carry on with this a little bit more. So this is either going to be England or Germany. It really doesn't matter because they're both tough fixtures. But let's say, for example, Sweden and Croatia. Let's have a look at that one. Let's say, for example, it's Sweden or it's Croatia. It's either going to be Sweden versus England, or Sweden versus Germany, or England versus Croatia. They're all kind of difficult fixtures, but out of those group of four, I would fancy Germany to probably be the favourites, or England to be the favourites. If I'm going to bet on two teams who are most likely to be favourites, it's either going to be England or Germany. So that makes it easier because for this fixture, I'm going to want to target most likely German players at number priority, and then England players. So really, that's what I'm getting at in this one, is that you're probably going to want to target either German or English players. So let's just carry on again. We've still got to decide on this fixture and this fixture. So this is a really tough one because obviously Portugal are no slouches. So, but the reality is, again, whoever wins out of these two is probably going to beat whoever wins out of these two. Most likely, this is just odds because Holland are bigger favourites to go further in tournament. So Portugal, Wales are probably the least favourite, and Denmark. Now that shouldn't mean too much because Wales have surprised people in the past. But again, you could just pick a budget option for both these teams, and that way you don't risk too much. Whereas you probably want to go with the premiums from one of these two teams because that way, if you go with a premium from both one of Holland or Portugal, they're both likely to. One of them is likely to go far, so you're lowering your risk. So let's just do some permutations now. So let's say, for example, Holland beat Portugal. They're going to pay Wales or Denmark, which is a good fixture. if Portugal beat Holland, Portugal either play Wales or Denmark. They're both good fixtures. So I would say target Holland or Portugal players. So really what it comes down to is you're going to be targeting French players, Belgian players, Italy players, Portuguese players, Holland players, and Germany or England players. That's really what your team should be made up of for the round of 16. Now, that may be quite boring, but that's just going with the odds. And really, in the round of 16, you don't want to risk too much. The group stages, you got all the use of your chips, so you don't have to, you don't have to worry about risking things. You can take risks, but now you really want to be looking at picking bread and butter players. So let's just consider the players from these teams then. So we're really just going to be considering picking a team where we're just focusing on French, Belgium, Italy, Portugal, England, and Germany. They're really the players that we want to be focusing on. So let's have a look at that. First up, let's have a look at Italy. So we've got the favourites like Donnarumma, Mobile, Spinazzola, Insigne, Berardi. These are all the pretty highly owned players, high-scoring players for Italy. But in terms of budget prices, because we're going to be picking a lot of the premium teams, we're going to need some money. So I think that it can't hurt to go with a relatively strong lineup for defence for Italy, because they've got such a good defensive record. It's not going to be likely to be a high-scoring game in terms of Italy versus Belgium, and it most likely is going to be Italy versus Belgium. So I would probably go for a balance of defensive assets for Italy. And this is really going to be the trickiest fixture, I think, Italy versus Belgium, because people are going to have multiple of these players. So perhaps if I was you, I would probably target Italy players over Belgian players. They're probably going to be favourites to beat Belgium, and also, even if Belgium beat them, there's straight swaps either way. So you're either going to be targeting Italy or Belgian players. But for me, the must-owns from Italy are Spinazzola and Donnarumma. I think that you've got to have at least one of those because their defence is just so strong. So I'd be targeting Spinazzola or Donnarumma. In terms of their midfielders, I have put Insigne in my team, but I'm considering changing him because there are good budget options for Italy, like Berardi, or maybe even Locatelli, although I think maybe Locatelli's haul was maybe a one-off. But if not, you can always go for Berardi. So, but even so, Italy are not likely to be a prolific goal-scoring team. They're most likely to keep clean sheets. So I would target the defenders for Italy or the goalkeeper. If it doesn't go well, you can target Courtois and Meunier, for example. You can do the straight swap from Donnarumma and Spinazzola to Meunier and Courtois. There's not much price difference there. So I would personally prioritise those two players out of Italy. Moving on to Belgium, again, this is a tough one because they're going to be facing Italy, which is just such a risky fixture. So they are most likely going to be facing that. That's the favourite odds, but I could be wrong, obviously, because I want to get this video out before, when people have time to at least attempt to predict things. So and have chance to change their teams up and have good information. So I personally would avoid Belgium going too heavy on Belgium. I would avoid their defenders and probably even avoid Lukaku. Now, just going back to the predictions, the war chart. So Belgium are most likely going to be either facing, just quickly, let's just have a look at matches. So Belgium are most likely going to be facing either Switzerland, Slovakia, Switzerland, Croatia, Slovakia, or Portugal. Now, we've gone through those fixtures. None of them are that good for attacking fixtures. Like, all of those teams are pretty defensive. Like, Switzerland are pretty good defensively. Croatia are pretty good defensively, although probably the weakest out of those groups. Portugal, pretty good defensively. Slovakia, even though they're not the best team, they're still pretty good defensively. None of those are particularly good fixtures for attacking players, or at least for getting huge attacking returns. But having said that, I would never underestimate I would never underestimate Belgium too much. So let's just go back to that team. You really either want to be targeting one of De Bruyne or Lukaku. That's all I would go for Belgium, because if you target too much, you could end up just spending quite a big budget on a player who's probably going to blank. But even if they do blank, they're in that premium bracket, so you can just switch them quite easily. And this is another point that I wanted to make during this video, is you want to target players which are easy swaps during the later rounds. So if you target premium players, most premium teams, most of the better teams are going to have premium players who are going to make it through to late stages. So you want to kind of make sure you've got some premium spots in your teams. So yeah, I would only either target either Lukaku or De Bruyne from Belgium. So let's go back to the teams again. So we've got France. Let's have a look at France. Again, France is quite a tricky one. So there's quite a variety of, in terms of a bracket of prices. But really, what stands out to me from France is that there really is just no midfield options. That, I mean, you've got the midfield options of Kante, Pogba, and Rabiot, and really, this guy is probably not going to get you points, and neither is Kante, and Pogba. Even Pogba is not probably worth the price. So I'm either going to be looking for France defenders or France forwards. So really, if you're going for defenders, I would be going for Kimpembe or Pavard. Maybe Varane, but you may as well go for Kimpembe because he's cheaper. And if you're going for forwards, is he going to be Griezmann or Mbappe? And a lot of people are probably going to go for Mbappe because he's still favourite to be probably even the Golden Boot still, or player of the tournament. So he's still quite strong for that. So he's going to have to turn up at some point. Perhaps that's what I'm thinking. But again, if you go for Mbappe or you go for Griezmann, you've got that premium alternative. So if you go for Mbappe or Griezmann and France fall out, but Netherlands make it through, you've got a straight swap to Depay. So it's good to have those premium forwards there. So I would definitely target a forward from France, either Griezmann or Mbappe, and go for a premium in defence, either Pavard or Kimpembe. So yeah, I would keep an eye on those. Going back to the predictors, let's have a look at Germany. So Germany have got the most variety, I think, and probably the most difficult team to predict. But I think after the Hungary game, this is really going to be where we'll be able to figure out who to go with from Germany. I think the standouts for me are Gosens, Kimmich, and Havertz. I think that Muller apparently is injured and he's not likely going to play, maybe even for the round of 16 as well. And just quickly, I don't think there's many forward options from Germany. I mean, you've got Werner, who's just not like to score, and Muller. So really, you're going to be looking at midfield and defence. You're not really going to target goalkeepers because Neuer's 6 million and it's just not worth 6 million. They're not going to keep clean sheets when you've got Gosens, who can also get your attacking returns. So I think that really the targets for me are going to be Gosens, Kimmich, and the midfield is just really up in the air. I mean, I've gone for Kimmich because he's a budget option, but really Havertz could be a premium that gets points. So could Gnabry, so could Gundogan, so could Kroos, maybe even Sane. Like, there's just so much variety. There's also Goretzka, who'll be replacing Muller, but you'll have to keep an eye on that because Muller might only be out for might only be out for match day 3, might be back for round of 16. So really the safe picks for me are either going to be, for midfield, they're either going to be Kimmich or Havertz. I probably wouldn't go for anyone else, but I would keep an eye on that for midfield. But for me, definitely put Gosens in your team because he is very, very attacking with Germany. And if we just look at the predictors, they're likely going to be facing England, who don't score many goals. And then there's also most likely Croatia or Sweden. So I mean, they've got a good lineup. Neither of those teams, none of those teams score that many goals. Sweden's barely scored any goals. So have Croatia and so have England. So Germany is a good one to target, I think, defence and midfield. And don't forget, you also get an extra point for midfield keeping clean sheets. So I would target midfielders who can get a goal and who can also maybe get a clean sheet, because it does make a little bit of a difference being able to have those both. So yeah, I would target Germany defence. So let's go back again to predictor and just have a look at Portugal and maybe even Spain as well. So yeah, it's difficult to predict for Portugal. But yeah, I would go with the safe pick as Ronaldo, because if they do get through, he's just so likely to get points, and he's a captaincy option pretty much every match. So most likely Ronaldo. If we're going for midfield, I think that Bruno Fernandes is just overpriced, and Bernardo Silva just doesn't look that attacking. So having said that, I mean, just targeting midfield purely, I mean, the priority is probably going to be Jota and Bernardo Silva. I mean, I wouldn't go with anyone else, to be honest. I think it's just not that likely that they'll get points. In terms of budget, I think Carvalho plays very defensive, and so does Danilo, so there's just really not much point in going there. In terms of defence, again, I think, I mean, it's just Guerrero's just overpriced. Pepe could be a good option, isn't he? 5 million if you need a budget in defence, but I think there's probably better options there. So I would maybe only go for the goalkeeper. I've gone for Patricio, and really this is because if you go for, you want to be going for keepers who are on opposite ends of the draw. So I'm either going to go for France, Spain, Belgium, or Italy goalkeeper, and pair one of those four with Portugal. Let's say, for example, if Denmark go through, Portugal, Denmark, Croatia, Germany. But the reality is, I mean, Denmark and Croatia are probably up in the air. But Germany and Portugal, much more easy to predict. I would say Portugal's probably the easiest to predict out of those. So I think Patricio is a pretty safe option. And I know a lot of people don't like going too expensive on the goalkeepers, but you have to remember that it's a completely different game in the round of 16. You want to be going for safe picks, and goalkeeper is probably one of the easiest picks to get points on, because there is a lot of teams that can keep a clean sheet, and if you're going to maximise your potential on that, if you pick goalkeepers who are on opposite ends of the draw. So again, let's just have a look at that. I actually don't know what happened to Holland. Let's just say, for example, Holland win, and Portugal don't win. Equally, you could also go for a Holland goalkeeper. I would say Holland, Portugal, or in terms of budget, you could even go for Wales, Denmark, Croatia. So any of those teams could be a good goalkeeper pick, a second goalkeeper pick. But really, for goalkeeper picks, is he going to be pairing up one of those four with one of these four? So is he going to be Simon? Very unlikely Simon. I'd probably go for Lloris or Donnarumma or Courtois. Personally, I'd either go for Lloris or Donnarumma, and I've prioritised Donnarumma because there's also good defensive options for France. So I think that that's the best combo that I've got here is Patricio and Donnarumma. I think they're the most risk-averse goalkeeper pair. So let's just go back to the team again. The other team we've got is Netherlands. So let's just go through a quick run through of each position. Stekelenburg, he could be a good budget second option for goalkeeper. So if you've got Donnarumma or Lloris or even Courtois, go for, if you want a budget option, go for Stekelenburg as a paired goalkeeper. That works really well. In terms of defenders, I wouldn't really pick anyone but Dumfries. This guy is just like, he's basically like a second striker. If Netherlands go through, this guy is going to be getting points, and you do not want to be missing out on them. So I would definitely go for Dumfries from defence. In terms of midfield, it's a little tricky, but I think it seems pretty favourite that Wijnaldum will be the guy to go with. He seems to be playing almost as like a second striker behind Depay. Other than that, I can't really see De Roon getting points, and I don't really see anyone else getting too many points from here. So yeah, and probably Wijnaldum. Forwards, it's kind of obvious. It's either going to be Depay, and I just probably wouldn't don't get tempted by Malin or Weghorst, because they're not that likely to get points, and this, yeah, I just wouldn't bother with them. So it's probably going to be Depay, Wijnaldum, or Dumfries. So go with one of those three, maybe even two or three of those three. So I mean, I couldn't blame you, because Netherlands have got a decent draw there. I mean, yeah, they could end up playing Portugal, but I could see them scoring against Portugal, and also, you know, you never know how far they could go in the tournament. So there's not too much risk with them. There's also good swaps. So like if Depay, if the Netherlands don't get through, Depay can switch to a premium. That's a good option. Or equally, Wijnaldum, you can also switch to a premium. So it's good. I would definitely target Netherlands players because again, you can switch around the premiums, and that's really what you want. So final team now. We're going to be looking at England. So let's just start goalkeepers. I'm going to say, England could be one to target. If they beat Germany, which is there is a good chance of that happening, they will probably be clean sheet in the process because even though Germany are a great attacking team, England are pretty much one of the most defensive sides I've ever seen in this tournament. They could get a good draw here, and if they do beat Germany, then they've got potentially Croatia or Sweden. Now that's a really good draw because neither of those teams scored too many goals, and the last time for Croatia they kept a clean sheet. So again, you've got a good draw there. So I think Pickford could be a decent alternative to Patricio. It's really just again about risk and who you think is going to go through in that round of 16 and where they're going to qualify in the group. But it could be a good option, Pickford. We'll know for certain when we get all the fixtures. But yeah, keep an eye on that. Looking at defenders now, I probably wouldn't go with any defenders. I think it's just the only one I would target maybe is John Stones, but again, there's probably better options in his price bracket. Moving on to mids, I think the only one I would think about from mids are budget options because England just do not score that many goals. I am tempted by Jack Grealish. Now, I have heard that Mason Mount has to isolate for reasons, because he may have coronavirus or he's been in contact with someone who has coronavirus. So that means Grealish then becomes a really good option because 7.4, he can get a goal and assist. So I do like Grealish as a pick. And you never know, he could make the world of difference. So I would keep an eye on that. Forwards, I just wouldn't touch Harry Kane. He's in terrible form. And Rashford and Calvert-Lewin, they're just not that likely to get loads of goals. So really, you're going to be targeting budget mids, maybe Grealish, or Stones or Pickford. That's really your options. So there's not too many in terms of not too many options there. So I would just keep an eye on that, and yeah, go with your gut on that one. So I think that pretty much covers all the teams. The certain players for me are French, Belgium, Italy, Holland, Germany, and England. I think those are the real favourites. You could also let's just quickly jump to Spain as well because they could get through. This is just if you want to risk it. But personally, the only players I would be going from Spain would be either going budget like Simon and Pau Torres, or you could also go budget again with Moreno, or you could go budget again with Olmo. I wouldn't go with anyone else. If you're going for a Spain player, use them as a budget option because it's pretty low risk. If they do go through, all their budget options could potentially get points, and it allows you to spend on the premiums who could also get points. So I would target Spain for the budget options and nothing else. Don't go for Moratas or Ferran Torres. Go for the budget options for Spain because that's really where their value is. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the teams of the major teams. Those are who I'll be targeting, and that's what my team's going to be based around. But obviously, stay tuned for my final draft before round of 16. I'm really going to be targeting players who I think are going to go far in the tournament because you really don't want to be taking hits when you get into the later stages. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm going to be doing one more video probably on Wednesday, just going through my top picks before the start of the round of 16. I think that's going to be a big point to make because it's going to make that round is going to make such a difference because a lot of people won't have the wild cards, or to switch things up. So I think that's going to be a huge video on which players to go with till the end of the tournament. So stay tuned to that, and until then, take care.